Hi, I'm Logan Fraser, and this is a basic guide on how to design in FreeCAD. Today we'll be designing this basic smart plug design. To begin with, open up your FreeCAD program, and it begins on this start page right here. What we're going to do is go to the part design and press create new. We have two tabs right here, the model and tasks tab, and we're going to create body, create sketch, and then select a plane to sketch on. It doesn't really matter which plane you begin your sketching on. It only affects the orientation that your part defaults to in any slicer. So we have our basic XY plane here, and we're going to start by creating a rectangle. This is going to be the basic smart plug design. So first, let's measure the width with our calipers, and that is 37 millimeters. So we're going to take our length tool up here and type in 37, and then we're going to measure our width, and that's going to be 80 millimeters. Just type in that. So now we have this basic shape. So because it's all green, we know that it's fully constrained and none of these points or lines can move. So we can close our sketch, and some basic navigation, control and right click are to move it laterally, and then shift and right click are to move it on its axis. So go on the model tab. You want to make sure you have this sketch selected and press the pad tool. So we're going to measure this width, which is 36 millimeters, and that will extrude the face outwards. So we now have this block right here, and we're going to start by designing the prongs on the front. We're open the sketcher tool while having that face selected, and we'll need one circle for the round prong, and then two rectangles for the rectangular prongs. To begin with, let's constrain this round one. So when we measure it, the diameter of the prong is 5 millimeters, and FreeCAD measures circles with the radius, so we just have to divide that 5 millimeters by 2. So we have 2.5 millimeters. So now our circle is fully constrained in its shape, but not in space. Next, use this tool that looks like a blue box to make these edges constrainable. This means that we can now use these edges and points to constrain our objects to them. So use the horizontal measurement tool. We want this circle to be in the exact middle of our rectangle, and we know that this length is 80 millimeters, so we can just divide that by 2, and the width will be 40 millimeters. To find how far the prong is from the bottom of the smart plug, we can use our calipers to measure that, and that is around 8 millimeters. So what we want to do is use our vertical measuring tool to measure the center point of the circle and this bottom line. So we can use the origin for that. Now, we know that this bottom of the circle to this line is 8 millimeters, but we need to add the radius of 2.5 millimeters. So that will be 10.5 millimeters. Next, we know that they're the same size, so I'm going to use an equality constraint to make the rectangles have the same dimensions. Now that they have the same dimensions, we need to find their width and length. So they are each 1.5 millimeters wide and 6.5 millimeters tall. So we can use our length tool to input those values. Now we can find the distance between the two prongs, and that is 11.25 millimeters. So we can use our horizontal constraint tool. Lastly, we want to constrain these vertically, and we know that they're perfectly in line, so we can use our vertical constraint tool and make it 0 millimeters. This will make sure that they're both in line. So now they're fully constrained, but not in space. So we can use this point right here because it's fully constrained, and we know that it's in the middle of the rectangle. We can use this point to constrain these in the middle. So we can use our horizontal constraint tool to find the midpoint of this, which is 11.25. I'll just divide that by 2 on a calculator. That is 5.625 millimeters. Alright, so now we know that this is directly in the middle, and now we can measure the top of the prong to the top of the smart plug, and that is 12 millimeters. So we can use simple vertical constraint to make that 12 millimeters tall. Alright, it's fully green, so we've fully constrained our sketch. We can now use the pad tool. Let's measure the height of the prongs. So the rectangular prongs are 17.5 millimeters tall, and the round prong is 21 millimeters tall. So first, let's put in our dimension of 17.5, and then we'll add our height on the round one until we get to 21. So that is 3.5 millimeters. So now the round prong is 21 millimeters tall, and the rectangular prongs are 17.5 millimeters. Next, let's make a sketch on this side right here using this sketching tool. And instead of sketching out our circular prong and the rectangular ones, we can use our previous design to make these lines constrainable. Sorry, I selected the face. It'll give you an error message if you do that. And the red lines do not show up right now because it is showing them on the sketching plane and not the plane that we were on. So now that we have this, we're going to make the holes 0.5 millimeters larger than the prongs that we designed. So let's add our circle and our rectangles. So now we know that the radius of this circle is 2.5 millimeters, so we can make the radius of our new circle 3 millimeters. Now we can use our horizontal and vertical constraints to make our new rectangles 0.5 millimeters larger on all dimensions. They're all green, so we know it's fully constrained. We can close the sketch. And now we're going to use this pocket tool to extrude those back, creating a hole. And I'll just make that 21 millimeters, which is the largest length of our prongs. So now we have that hole there, and we have our 3 prongs there. Next, let's put some fillets on the outside corners. So we're going to select those. And remember to hold Control as you select multiple lines. So to find the fillets that we need, I have fillet gauges here. So depending on which gauge fits the best, that will be the size of the fillet that you need. So it seems that 16 millimeters fits the best. Now these fillet gauges are in the diameter of the fillet. So since FreeCAD measures their fillets by the radius, we're going to need 8 millimeters of a fillet. And the fillet is just the rounded corners here. So now we're going to put a fillet on here. We're going to make that rounded over just like the plug. So you can select the edge, make a fillet, and then we can just we know that the radius is 2.5 millimeters, so we can make the fillet 2.5 millimeters. Next, let's put some 1 millimeter chamfers on these edges. Chamfers are kind of like fillets, but they're just straight. Alright, and at the front of the plug, we're going to put a 1 millimeter chamfer on these edges. Alright, lastly, we're going to put a sketch on this face, and then put our hole through the prongs. Let's use this tool to make these edges constrainable. Alright, so the diameter of these holes is 3 millimeters. So that would be 1.5 millimeters in the radius. And we know it's centered, so we can measure this length here, which is 4.5 millimeters, and then have the horizontal length of 2.25 millimeters. Next, we need to find the vertical height, and from the top of the hole to the top of the prong, it is 4 millimeters. So in order to have the top of the prong right here to the top of the hole, we're going to have to add 1.5 millimeters. That will be 5.5 millimeters. Okay, you can close the sketch and pocket that, and then just make that through all. Alright, and there is your smart plug. I hope you learned a lot about designing in FreeCAD, and stay tuned for a part 2.